Welcome back to Conversations. I'm Rusty Ray. This is a chance for us at North Metro TV to catch up with newsmakers or folks who are doing things in the community or about efforts in the community. And today we're happy to be joined by Anoka County Sheriff James Stuart. Thank you for being here, Sheriff.
Thank you so much for having me.
You've been sheriff since, I guess, 2011, is that right?
Correct, yes. Third term.
And I don't know, this may be a simple statement or it may not be, but I would imagine that a lot has changed in Anoka County. We're going to talk about 2020 in a minute. But,
Indeed.
but in that time, Anoka County has gone through a lot of changes, I would imagine.
It has, certainly has. As the population continues to grow, as the dynamics of law enforcement continue to change and evolve, and as technology, I think, is probably one of the largest areas changes, we continue to try to be on the front end of that curve and be proactive in those areas as well. And I'm fortunate. I think we've been doing a lot of things right, and I say my role is to surround myself with great people and let great things happen. And we have, I think, in many ways accomplished that and exceeded even what I had hoped to do in a lot of ways because of a team that's willing to kind of anticipate trends, anticipate curves, and to help us move in the right directions before they kind of become the norm.
You talk about technology, you're talking about tools that your folks can use, your deputies and other people that work for you can use, but also what people can use to help. I know I've talked to and I've registered my camera with the county's security camera registry for homeowners and things like that, but there's other things that continue to develop also with, I guess, social media, and
Absolutely.
that has changed in those 8 or 9 years.
Yeah, that's a great point. The entire social media structure is dynamically different than it was a decade ago as it continues to grow and evolve, and more platforms and more people engaged. And one of the things we continue to struggle with is the fact that that's seen as a evolving business practice. You know, in my mind's eye, if you need the sheriff's office, you call the sheriff's office or you go through dispatch. And we still have a lot of people that will tweet out or send a Facebook post about, you know, we need a deputy to respond. And so we're really trying to encourage people, don't use social media as a professional outlet to reach the sheriff's office, because those sites are not constantly monitored as dispatch would be or law enforcement areas. But the technology in so many other areas, as you mentioned, trying to work with the community for having that registry for cameras so that we can gather evidence around the communities and help find the people that might be victimizing others in the neighborhoods. We were the first to have the retinal scanning in the jail to provide a much safer environment. We're going to be rolling out, hopefully also the first in the state, for a body scanner in the jail to create a much safer environment and stop the contraband and weapons from being introduced in that facility. And the UAS program, or the drone program, we're also the first FAA-approved operation with those type of things, and it's been used just phenomenal tools. And I could go on and on. It's some days it's hard to keep up with the evolution as it's going, but we'll just keep trying to find ways to run more efficiently and provide better services.
4th largest county by population in the state right now, but it also, I think, Anoka County mirrors the state in terms of an urban environment, but then also very rural areas, and your deputies and you are tasked with protecting and serving all of those different areas all of the time.
Absolutely.
Challenges or opportunities that arise from that?
I think both. I tend to look at challenges as opportunities, and so it's a unique dynamic. Of course, our southern border is basically North Minneapolis, and we go up into Isanti from Forest Lake to Elk River and everything in between. And so we do have a very diverse population, a very diverse types of challenges and opportunities that are presented to us. I think it's a great opportunity for us to be immersed in all those communities. And so whether I get to work with, you know, the social groups, the Rotary, Lions, Kiwanis, veterans groups, senior groups, the list go on and on, but I get to meet and work with folks across all 21 communities of Anoka County. And so it's a great way to build those bridges, to build those relationships, and to have a better understanding for me of what's going on, not just in each city, but in each neighborhood and in each block. And so it's important for us to continue to have our ears open and our mouths closed and to try to be a good partner at the table, and I'm proud that our team wants to embrace that.
Is there any group that you feel like in your time as sheriff you've grown that relationship where you can point to say, we've done X, Y, and Z, and really we've seen the benefit from that in outreach or specific efforts that have then provided a result that you were hoping for at this point?
I can't think of any one specific group. I would just say I know, again, looking to our team who comes up with a lot of the ideas, As an example of, they'll say we'd like to do a softball tournament for a food shelf, or we'd like to do a hockey game for whatever event. We've established a fishing event for youth. We've established the polar plunge in Anoka County for Special Olympics. And so I don't know that there's any one group that really stands out as being more successful in our outreach than others, but another one is the Heroes Walk in Anoka that we kind of embraced to launch to combat domestic and sexual violence. And so I think as we do each of these, it just helps remind all of our citizenry and our communities that we are a part of the community and we want to continue to be a part of the positive change within the community.
As your role, not only of sheriff here, but as part of a larger organization of sheriffs and on the state and now the national level, recently you just got finished with a presentation to a group of sheriffs from around the country, but you also got a chance to interact and ask a question directly to the President of the United States. Tell me about that.
Yeah, that was a unique opportunity. I'm very fortunate in the Anoka County law enforcement model, the public safety model really is very unique, and as I've been able to travel around the state and around the country, I'm seeing that it's more unique than even I realized, in that we all work very closely together, the police departments, the fire departments, EMS, and certainly the sheriff's office, and we train together, we work together, we get along well together, and we support each other, understanding that our ultimate mission is to serve. And so I kind of grew up in this environment thinking that's the way things were. And I quickly learned as I started having my horizons broadened that that's not the case everywhere. And so the fact that Anoka County Public Safety is doing it right, that the Anoka County Sheriff's Office has been embracing model training, model policies, model practices, those kind of things, it's become more of a demand, I guess, that we are able to be at the table. And so across the state, working with our legislators, and now even across the nation, working with other policymakers and a part of this national police reform, state police reform, those kind of things, we've been able to have a voice. And specific to your question, the president has had calls with the nation's sheriffs usually a few times a year, and this last time around the topic was civil unrest, and I was specifically asked if I would be willing to pose a question to the president. Of course, you know, that's a pretty rare opportunity, so my focus was on, as we look at the civil unrest across our country and we look at the communities being victimized as a result of a lot of the challenges being faced, my question was those that are creating and sponsoring the acts of terrorism that are occurring, the complete destruction of neighborhoods, and as the communities cry out for help to restore their neighborhoods and to not have all their businesses burnt down, would the individuals that sponsor those type of events be held accountable? And his answer was an emphatic yes. So we'll see how that all plays out in the long run, but it's important that we all at local, state, national levels continue to have the dialogues and try to work through the different nuances of all of the challenges that are facing us right now.
Is that something specific to Anoka County? We've had, the publicized reports back in the late spring of when there was so much happening, especially in Minneapolis and St. Paul. A couple of things popped up here at Northtown Mall. There was a bit of an incident and things like that. Not to downplay any of it, obviously. So that experience, are you seeing and hearing more concerns from people about what they are seeing and hearing in Anoka County? And is that what kind of led you to that kind of a pointed question for him?
No, the question itself, I would say, was actually related to my role within the Minnesota Sheriff's. I'm on the executive committee, fortunate to be elected to the executive committee with the Minnesota Sheriff's Association and elected to the executive committee for the National Sheriff's Association. And so when given that type of opportunity, I think it's important that I represent the nation's sheriffs. And so hearing that that was a common platform, a common question, I was trying to represent the nation's sheriffs with that question. Within Anoka County, we have had numerous protests and events and rallies that have occurred around the county. They've all been, other than the incidents you cited, of course, we've had some of the attacks and the negative things going on, but we've had a lot of peaceful protests. And that's our objective. And I've said all along, we stand with our protesters. Everyone has the right to have that voice, and we will fight for them to have that voice. And we want that to be the case. And at several of the events in Anoka County, I was able to actually speak at those rallies, and they were powerful moments of unity. And I'm excited to say, again, of the roughly 8 or so that come to my mind, they were all peaceful, they were all positive in their outcomes, and people were able to be heard and have an impact. And we were able to literally walk around within the crowds instead of an us versus them mentality and have some just amazing dialogues.
I was going to ask you and your team taking that opportunity to hear and to interact and maybe even learn something or educate them as well. Is that the goal when you interact like that?
Absolutely. We know that there's a lot of different perceptions about what's going on out there. We also know that there's a lot of negative rhetoric and propaganda towards law enforcement right now, and some of that's earned, some of it isn't. But what I tell my team, regardless, it's our job to be ambassadors, because if somebody has a certain perception about law enforcement based on, my opinion, radically skewed numbers, that's still their reality, because everyone's perception is their own reality. So we need to be open-minded to their reality, and to help, we need to listen, we need to take in what their perception is, and we need to help them understand the other side of that coin, and stop talking about the things that divide us and start talking about the things that unite us. I'm a firm believer that the more we keep pointing out our differences, the more divisive it becomes, when in fact we're all humans just trying to get through this crazy life and this crazy 2020, and we ought be working harder to unite our communities than to divide them.
I think that sheriffs are unique in that they are elected officials, but also badge wearing, literally public safety officers. I mean, yes, district attorneys and prosecutors often are elected, but in that role as both an elected official and a law enforcement officer, where do you start the handbook on 2020? And I know we're only 2/3 of the way through, but where do you start when it comes to reflecting and then looking forward? And if you're going to look back on 2020, what's the first chapter of what we've learned and what we did in order to make the best of these things?
That's a great question. It's ever evolving. I think as I look back, if I had to say a word, it would be adaptive. We have 6 divisions within the sheriff's office. We certainly try to be responsive to the community needs, and from the onset, my attitude has been, we will continue to serve. It's not going to be easy. We're going to be doing things differently, and across all 6 divisions, and each division has multiple specialty units, and literally all of our operations have been changed. And so it's certainly an interesting dynamic that we would have to redesign a sheriff's office for some of the things that have been going on, and then to have to revisit it every week or sometimes every few days in order to make the modifications along the way. Those challenges, I think our team has done a great job in rising to the challenge to be, again, remain actively engaged in the community and doing the job that we're sworn to do. Your point about the role of the sheriff, it is increasingly unique. Certainly, I see my job as a public servant first. It's a privilege to serve as an elected official, and in that capacity, I think it's ever important to be transparent and accountable. Sometimes people will ask my opinion, they're surprised that I'll give it so freely, but that, for me, that goes back to being transparent and accountable. I went into this saying if I was a one-term sheriff, I was okay with that. It's my objective to do the right thing for the right reasons. And I told my team, don't get caught up in politics, don't get caught up in any of those other things that can distract us from our mission. And our mission is to protect and serve the community in a manner that preserves the public trust. So they've heard me use the word ambassador 1,000 times, and they are very clear that without the public trust, there's literally no reason for us to exist. And a big part of that all ties together as we look at how do we adapt through 2020, maintaining the public trust while protecting and serving. And if I had, at some point, we've done after action reports on some of the civil unrest, the riots. We continue to document our evolution through COVID, but that book is yet to be written on what our total takeaways are, because I think we've still got a lot more ahead of us.
It seems like a few months ago you had some pointed perspective and even some pointed words for elected officials who were kind of grasping, it seemed, about how to manage and how to enforce laws about masks and distancing, and particularly for businesses and business owners, there were some concerns. And you kind of stood up and said, we're going to do this. Why was that important for you as sheriff and an elected official, an agency head and a law enforcement officer? Why was that important for you to, and I felt like it was a strong statement. It may, depending on your perspective, controversial for those who didn't agree.
Sure.
But it felt like some strong statements from you about what your department and you as sheriff were going to do. Why was that important?
Again, for me, if people ask the question, they have the right to know. And when our office is getting inundated with questions, sometimes I know I'm stepping in front of a train if I do a post like that, but it's an effort to answer the questions before they're being asked because we're getting so many other people asking it. I know if we've received 150 questions, that 150 more each day are going to continue to roll in. So we try to get ahead of those questions at times. In the case, the two, of course, that were arguably controversial, we're talking about the Minneapolis defunding the police, and that's a whole other dialogue, and we can come back to that if you like. You asked about the masks. So the masks specifically, I was part of the group working with the governor's office through a lot of these things. And so, the governor himself said he didn't want law enforcement being the enforcement arm of this. They have the phone line, they have the state folks who are doing the follow-up or issuing fines to businesses, but the onus of enforcement was on the businesses. I thought I was very clear that we are certainly educating people, we're practicing safe things, we're trying to be out there in the community doing the good things, but at the end of the day, the violation itself was a petty misdemeanor. I can't think of hardly any other petty misdemeanors that we actively enforce, and especially in this day and age when everyone is spread so thin, the idea of using law enforcement as the enforcement branch for a petty misdemeanor that's controversial at best just seemed counterintuitive. And so as an elected official, first, I wanted people to know my stance on it. And then second, from a law enforcement standpoint, again, we don't actively enforce any other petty misdemeanors. It wasn't a matter of being dismissive of the governor's executive order. It was a matter of being realistic in the world in which we live in. And again, we know that the businesses have the onus of the enforcement. We've said we expect people to comply with the business's expectations, and if they don't, the business has the right to ask them to leave. If they don't leave, then we will respond and arrest somebody for trespassing. But the mask violation itself is really more of a state operational thing.
Opportunity to educate people, even in those things you just laid out, that's another way to adapt, but that's another way to respond to just turmoil and people grasping at things that they want to make a point, but they're
Right.
scared about other. It's an opportunity for you and your agency.
Absolutely. Yeah, we continue to try to take the educational approach on these things, and obviously we want people to stay healthy and stay safe. And I wore my mask in here today, and
right.
We embrace doing the right thing, but at some point in time there also needs to be a little bit of neutral logic applied to it, and what's practical, what's a practical application, and having our law enforcement act as stormtroopers when there's already a lot of negative propaganda about them just seems to make very little sense. And as I said, the governor himself said he didn't want us to be the enforcement branch.
Do you have to, going back to your conversation with the sheriffs and the president, do you have to kind of look at where, if there is kind of an uprising of question, or if there is a protest, if it's organized by, you kind of have to look at where it's coming from? Is it an outside group, an outside of Anoka County that's just seizing an opportunity? Is that easy to identify? Are you trying to consider the source when something does come to your attention, or someone is in your face or in a deputy's face? Are you trying to consider that through all of this and say, here's where we are, I don't know where you're coming from, but this is what the county is about?
Yeah, I think you have to be mindful of where they're from. A lot of my biggest fans, who haters are going to hate, it doesn't take a whole lot of digging to find out, they're out of LA or they're out of Portland or they're out of somewhere that quite honestly holds little relevance to the way we do business in Anoka County or even across the state of Minnesota. And so I don't necessarily give them an ear. I don't necessarily care what they think, to be blunt. But those who have reached out, I can tell you that have people who have sent a lot of letters, people who have written posts, those kind of things. If it's somebody who is from the region with smart questions, people have the right to ask those questions and they have the right to know. I've had a lot of meetings with people. I've requested meetings, and I had a lady in my office just yesterday morning, as the most recent, who had written a letter, was concerned about what they're seeing in society and didn't understand why law enforcement operated the way they did. That's a very valid point, and so I asked her if she'd be willing to come in and meet, and she did. It was a wonderful conversation. I think she and I both learned a lot through the interaction, and that's what I want to keep doing, is as people have those concerns, as they have those issues, or things that just don't seem to make sense in a year when nothing seems to make sense, I think the healthiest thing to do is to have open, honest dialogues, to lean in, to try to build those bridges, and to try to figure out how do we move forward together in a positive way.
Let's get out of here on this. You talk about that, and if you can take those opportunities to meet one-on-one even for 5 minutes, that's great, but there's 400 plus thousand people
Right.
in your county. You're not going to be able to get everybody, even if they have or don't have a question. Some folks, their only exposure to your department is in a time of crisis,
Correct.
or in perhaps the worst moment of their lives, or it's at an event or on the street or at their kid's ball game, and there's a deputy there to help with crowd control and things like that. Are you looking at those opportunities differently after 2020? Are your deputies and other members of your team looking at those opportunities any differently as we've gone through 2020 and looking forward?
I don't know that we're looking at them differently because it's, as I said, it's always been important to us, those ambassador roles, and I get to see the behind the scenes kind of things every day where the deputies are buying Happy Meals for kids, or they're playing ball, or all of the things that people don't get to see. I do, and I get to receive the cards from the people saying, I can't believe your deputy did such an awesome thing. I can't believe your deputies were so compassionate. We get to see those every single day, and so our overall interactions have been positive. The overall responses, even through 2020, have been probably 90–95% very positive and supportive, but we want that other 5 or 10% too, and so we will continue to be those ambassadors to try and do good things in the community, and as we talked about those one-on-one meetings, a big part of that is for all of us to then take those conversations, and that's my advice or my ask of people when I do meet with them: go talk to your friends. We all need to keep spreading positive energy and positive information and a message of unity across well, hopefully our whole nation, but certainly across our areas of influence. And one other thing I would touch on real quick in that arena is I had pushed out an invite to all of our legislators, state and national, representatives, congressmen, senators, et cetera, to be able to have that type of dialogue. Here's who we are, here's what we're about. Let's not run with the rumor mill. Let's not listen to the 5% of the ultra squeaky wheels on either side. Somewhere in the middle is the truth, where the 80% of our communities also lie, and they deserve that we have these dialogues so that we can better understand each other to move us all forward in that positive direction.
All right. Sheriff James Stuart, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Enjoyed the conversation.
As did I. Thank you.